Most people assume consciousness is a steady light, something fixed, a given fact of being human. But awareness is not static. It is a spectrum, a terrain with peaks and abysses, a shifting horizon that changes with suffering, experience, and reflection. At times, it narrows into the claustrophobic tunnel of survival. At others, it opens into a vast sky where even the self dissolves. To speak of awareness is not to speak of intelligence, but of perception, the lens through which you interpret your own existence and the world around you. Think of it this way: two people can walk through the same street, yet inhabit entirely different realities. One sees only threats, scanning for danger, trapped in vigilance. Another sees opportunity, connection, or patterns of meaning woven into every detail. Awareness is not the world itself. It is the aperture through which the world is allowed to appear. And because the aperture shifts, so too does your sense of life, self, and truth. Most human beings remain confined to the lower registers of this spectrum. They live in a state of inherited reflex, clinging to survival, to tribe, to ego, mistaking the demands of the body or the social role as the ultimate truth of existence. These are not failings so much as conditions, evolutionary residues, psychological armors, cultural scripts. But to stay trapped in them is to confuse a partial vision with the whole sky. You are not condemned to the prison of the level you were born into, yet most never attempt escape. Growth, then, is often misunderstood. We speak of it as if it were progress, one achievement neatly stacking upon another. But the deeper reality is that growth is disorienting, even violent. It is the shattering of an old map before you've found a new one. It is the crisis that forces you to see through the illusions that once protected you. True awareness is not built like a house. It is burned into you like a scar. Each level of awareness demands a death. The death of certainty, of naive belonging, of ego's lies. Psychology confirms this rupture-driven model. Cognitive development theories from Piaget to Keegan show that new stages of consciousness emerge not from comfort, but from breakdown, when the old frame no longer makes sense of the world. Existential psychology adds the darker note. Awareness is often forged in suffering. Trauma rips you out of illusions. Death anxiety punctures your denial. Existential crises force you to confront the unbearable truth that life has no script written in advance. Growth is not gentle, it is catastrophic, but catastrophe clears the ground. The question then is not whether these levels exist. They are visible in history, in individuals, in cultures, but whether you dare to confront them. Each threshold you cross strips something away. At first it is innocence. Later it is ego. Eventually, it may even be your attachment to identity itself. The journey is not about becoming more. It is about becoming less encumbered by the lies that bind perception. The cost is high. You lose the safety of inherited meanings. But the reward is clarity, and with clarity a strange freedom. So this is not a story of progress nor of salvation. It is a map of inner terrains: survival, group loyalty, ego, reason, intuition, cosmic unity, and finally pure awareness. You have walked through some already, even if you didn't have the language for it. And if you listen carefully, you may hear the tension of the next level calling you forward, not as promise but as demand, because awareness is not a gift. It is a challenge. The only question is, will you stay asleep in the level that holds you, or will you risk everything to see more? Level 1. Survival consciousness. The animal core. You have to imagine what it means to live without symbols, without the stories that normally soften existence. At the first level of awareness, you are not a mind, not a citizen, not even a self in the narrative sense. You are a body governed by biology. Hunger becomes your compass, fear your horizon. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in the air is filtered through one question: is this a threat or is this a resource? There is no poetry here. There is only vigilance, the way a starving animal watches the ground for scraps, or the way a child flinches when the door slams too loudly. They who are trapped here do not live in tomorrow. They are anchored in the now with a brutality that makes clocks meaningless. This state strips you of the illusion of choice. You are reactive, your body making decisions before your mind can even speak. Civilization may laugh at this as primitive, but let crisis come, famine, war, disaster, and you will see how fast everyone collapses back into it. The mask of culture shatters easily. Underneath, survival breathes like an old beast waiting. But here is where psychology deepens the cruelty. Trauma often nails people to this level. They may appear functional, walking through jobs, speaking in polite tones, scrolling through phones, but inside they are animals at bay. The nervous system has decided it is not safe, and from that point onward, every perception is filtered through danger. This is why a war veteran may jump at fireworks, why an abused child scans the room before sitting, why a survivor of assault feels their body freeze when touched unexpectedly. They are not choosing to be this way. Their awareness has been hijacked by a memory too loud to fade, locking them in hypervigilance. You can call it PTSD, you can call it conditioning, but in truth it is survival consciousness refusing to let go. They are stuck in level 1, while the world insists they should be somewhere else. And so they become estranged. Not because they lack intelligence or potential, but because their body no longer trusts existence. Once your biology decides that life is a threat, it doesn't matter what philosophy you read. You are still in the animal core, living breath to breath. For most, this level only emerges when disaster strikes. A car skids, a storm breaks, a stranger lunges, and instantly you are dragged down to the body's logic. And perhaps you think of this state as temporary, something you leave behind when the crisis ends. But think carefully. How much of your daily life is already shaped by fear? Why do you lock your doors at night? Why does your heart spike when you hear unexpected footsteps behind you? Why do you obsess over money, food, status, if not because some part of you believes you could lose everything and be devoured? Level 1 is not just for the starving. It breathes under the skin of the comfortable. It whispers at the edge of your thoughts. What if you're not safe? The first level never disappears. It only hides until triggered. And the question that arises from this recognition is chilling. If so much of life is driven by survival, how do you ever rise beyond it? That leads us directly to level 2, where survival is no longer only about the body, but about belonging. Level 2, group consciousness, the tribe as self. You may think you are free, but if you trace your choices backward, you'll often find they are borrowed. At this second level of awareness, the self is no longer just a body. It becomes an extension of a group. Here, identity is inherited rather than discovered. You are your family's surname, your religion's creed, your nation's flag. Safety no longer depends solely on whether your stomach is full or your body is unthreatened. Instead, it is measured by whether the group accepts you. Approval becomes oxygen. Rejection becomes suffocation. To stand outside the group is to risk annihilation, because without the group's recognition, who are you? And so people obey without question. They repeat prayers they do not understand, salute flags they have never examined, and fight wars for causes they never chose. Belonging at this stage is not optional. It is survival. They cling to the group's protection, even as it demands submission. You too may feel this pressure every time you soften your opinion to avoid exile. Group consciousness whispers, better to conform and be safe than to question and be alone. The psychological mechanics of this stage are brutal in their simplicity. The group dictates morality, and the individual submits. At level 2, good is not a matter of truth but of conformity. Right and wrong are not born from inner reflection, but delivered as commandments from the tribe's elders, priests, teachers, or rulers. This is where the we versus they split becomes absolute. Your tribe is good. The outsider is dangerous. You can see this everywhere. From the child who refuses to eat different food at a friend's house, to the adult who believes their political party is inherently virtuous while the other side is evil. Once you are locked into this awareness, questioning feels like betrayal, and betrayal feels like suicide. Exclusion is a wound deeper than hunger, because it is not just the body that risks death, it is the identity itself. This is why people will endure abuse, humiliation, even death before they will leave their group. To them, exile is worse than execution, and so you begin to realize the tribe offers comfort at the price of thought. But here lies the hidden tension. While the tribe grants belonging, it also suffocates individuality. You must agree, you must submit, you must erase the parts of yourself that do not align with the collective. Yet somewhere inside you a voice whispers, what if the group is wrong? That whisper is dangerous, because to hear it is to feel the limits of level 2. You start to notice cracks, the hypocrisy of leaders, the arbitrary rules that demand loyalty, the way violence is justified as protecting us. You see how belonging can quickly mutate into blind obedience. And once you glimpse this, you are already moving toward the next stage. Because level 3 arises the moment you ask, what if my identity is not given by the tribe but forged by my own will? Level 3. Ego consciousness, the age of I. You arrive at a stage where the tribe no longer feels sufficient, where the group's voice dulls and another voice grows louder, the voice of the self. This is the birth of ego consciousness, the age of I. For the first time, you are not simply an extension of family, religion, or nation. You are something separate, something singular. But this awakening carries with it an illusion. You believe independence means constructing a fortress of self. The fortress is built out of identities, achievements, possessions, and roles. You tell yourself, I am what I own, I am what I achieve, I am how others see me. At this level, the gaze of others becomes the mirror in which you recognize yourself. Success feels like oxygen. Failure feels like annihilation. You chase recognition not because it fulfills you, but because the silence of being unseen feels unbearable. Others are no longer just companions. They are rivals, competitors, or reflections in which your ego can expand. The self feeds on comparison, and the comparison never ends. Narcissism thrives here, not always as vanity but as insecurity dressed in ambition. You may win, you may dominate, you may collect every badge of validation, but the fortress you build remains fragile. Its walls are strong only until the applause fades, and this is where the existential trap tightens. When your awareness is locked at the level of ego, everything becomes a contest of identity. You cannot rest because resting means being overtaken. You cannot simply exist because existing without recognition feels like disappearing. At this level, many people spend their entire lives circling inside the prison of their own reflection. Their hunger is not for food or belonging anymore, but for significance, for the illusion that they matter because others agree that they do. Yet this hunger can never be satisfied. It is the paradox of the ego. It wants permanence, but it builds itself from impermanent things. Status fades, power shifts, youth withers, the mirror cracks. And when the fortress begins to crumble, panic sets in. Some double down, building higher walls. Others collapse into despair, realizing that everything they clung to was smoke. And yet, within this collapse lies the seed of the next transformation, because the question eventually rises. If I am not my tribe and I am not my ego's reflection, then what am I? It is in that unsettling question that level 4 begins to stir. Level 4, reason consciousness, the rule of logic. You step into a space where chaos no longer intimidates you because you have discovered the sword of reason. Here, awareness no longer reacts instinctively or imitates the tribe. It measures, analyzes, and predicts. Logic becomes your lens, evidence your map, and science your compass. The world is no longer a mystery of fear or desire. It is a puzzle to be solved, a system to be understood. You believe that clarity comes from categorization, that control is achieved by structuring the variables of life, and that knowledge is armor against suffering. Emotions are noted, catalogued, and subordinated. Intuition is tolerated only if it aligns with measurable outcomes. At this level, you see cause and effect in every interaction, pattern in every event. You trust the intellect as the supreme tool, sometimes forgetting that what cannot be measured, love, grief, moral weight, transcendence, resists your equations. And yet this intellectual rigor brings its own liberation. You are no longer at the mercy of primal fear, tribal dictates, or ego's vanity. You are awake in a new sense, seeing structures beneath surface chaos. But this awakening carries a hidden peril. Logic without empathy can rationalize cruelty, justify harm, and create efficiency without conscience. And they who dwell here often mistake the brilliance of clarity for completeness. They build grand systems of knowledge, construct moral frameworks in syllogisms, and design societal architectures guided by reason alone, believing that the world bends to logic. Yet reality refuses such obedience. Life resists measurement. The human heart defies algorithms. Suffering is not always explainable. The danger is subtle. Reason becomes a fortress as rigid as ego, a place where warmth and vulnerability cannot enter. They forget that awareness must include more than the intellect, that consciousness also needs reflection, ethics, and emotional resonance. Enlightenment thinkers promised liberation through reason, but reason alone cannot reconcile the fractures of being. And here lies the hinge to the next stage. Awareness begins to question not just what can be known, but what must be felt, experienced, and integrated. It is the point where the intellect begins to meet the self, where questioning moves beyond logic and into the terrain of understanding. The door to level 5 is already ajar. Level 5, intuitive consciousness, beyond the rational mind. You begin to notice that the world cannot be contained in formulas or syllogisms, that truth sometimes arrives without argument or evidence. Here, awareness shifts from deduction to insight, from calculation to resonance. You feel the pulse beneath events, the hidden threads connecting lives, moments, and choices. Patterns emerge not as graphs or statistics, but as living signals, synchronicities that hum beneath the surface of ordinary perception. Your mind learns to read the symbols embedded in daily life, a stranger's glance, the echo of a dream, the rhythm of coincidence. Intuition is no longer an occasional whisper. It becomes a language, a map of the unseen architecture of existence. Creativity flows as an extension of awareness, and meaning is no longer imposed from outside, but emerges organically from the interplay of experience and consciousness. Psychology catches up here. Jung's archetypes, the collective unconscious, shadow and persona, revealing that the mind is not isolated, but woven into something far larger. You feel the weight of histories, myths, and unspoken truths as part of your own awareness, sensing that every life is a node in an invisible network of significance, and they who dwell here are often startled by their own perceptions. Logic alone cannot prepare you for seeing the hidden unity behind apparent randomness, or for understanding that symbols are more real than statistics. Decisions arise from knowing rather than reasoning. You trust perception that cannot be quantified. The mind begins to perceive life as a multi-layered narrative, where events are encoded with emotional, spiritual, and archetypal significance. You feel a deep connection to intuition, yet you also realize its fragility. Misreading symbols or mistaking desire for insight can mislead you profoundly. This stage bridges the intellect and the self, merging rational analysis with felt understanding, preparing you for the next threshold, where awareness transcends even pattern recognition and touches the full landscape of consciousness itself. The journey to level 6 is the leap from knowing to being. Level 6, cosmic consciousness. The self dissolves. You feel the boundaries of yourself begin to loosen, the walls of ego dissolving like mist in the morning sun. Identity, once a fortress built from fear, desire, and habit, now becomes porous. You perceive yourself not as a singular, separate being, but as a node in a vast network of experience, feeling the currents of consciousness that flow through all living things. Empathy expands beyond the familiar. Pain and joy of strangers touch you as intimately as your own. Time itself seems to stretch and fold. Past, present, and future feel less like fixed coordinates and more like aspects of a single, boundless awareness. Death loses its sting because the I you once clung to, the identity that survival and ego nourished, no longer dominates your perception. You encounter moments of awe, ecstasy, and revelation, states that Maslow and transpersonal psychologists describe as peak experiences. These are not mere feelings. They are transformations of being, dissolving separateness into a luminous continuum, and they who reach this stage often find the world altered forever. Ordinary conflicts, social hierarchies, and personal anxieties shrink in significance, revealing the fragility of the constructs that once ruled their life. Yet, paradoxically, the dissolution of ego does not annihilate action. It deepens it as you move with awareness informed by the whole rather than driven by the self. You begin to see patterns of connection in events, communities, and history, perceiving life as a living organism in which all participants are interwoven strands. The psychological implication is profound. Attachment and fear lose dominance, replaced by an ethical sensitivity and a sense of purpose rooted in awareness rather than ambition. This stage prepares the mind for the ultimate threshold, where awareness is neither personal nor cosmic, but a pure reflection of existence itself. The journey now moves toward level 7, the final frontier of human consciousness. Level 7, pure awareness, the witness beyond all levels. You arrive at a place where even the notion of arrival is an illusion. The self, with its desires, fears, and stories, is no longer the center of perception. You are not you in the sense you once believed. There is only awareness witnessing itself. Every thought, emotion, and experience arises and dissolves in this luminous field without leaving a scar, without claiming ownership. There is no need to control, to protect, to justify. The struggles that once defined your identity, the competition, the attachments, the ceaseless narratives of ego, reveal themselves as transient phenomena, like ripples on a vast, infinite ocean. Suffering loses its grip not because it is denied, but because the witness recognizes it is never truly personal. This awareness is both intimate and boundless. It does not separate observer and observed self and world. You see life as pure movement, arising spontaneously, without the distortions of expectation or resistance. The psychological liberation here is profound. Trauma, loss, fear, they exist but no longer ensnare. For the mind that clings is absent, leaving only the clarity of perception itself. And they who dwell here realize that this state is not emptiness in the ordinary sense. It is full, alive, and responsive. Compassion is natural, not moralized. Love flows not as possession, but as presence. Choices are made without ego-driven agendas, yet with perfect alignment to the rhythm of reality. Time and space appear as secondary phenomena. The witness inhabits a now that is complete in itself. Neuroscience hints at similar states through studies of non-dual awareness and meditative consciousness, where the sense of self dissolves and prefrontal activity aligns with present moment insight. Philosophers and mystics, from Tolle to Advaita Vedanta, from Buddhist emptiness to mystical Sufism, describe this not as attainment but as recognition. The mind finally sees what it has always been, yet could not perceive. Here ends the ladder of human awareness, the ultimate threshold where observation and being are one. And from this vantage you are ready to reflect, integrate, and live with all 7 levels in resonance. You are not trapped in a single level of awareness. Your consciousness is fluid, shaped by every choice, every fear faced, every insight cultivated. Some days you may find yourself slipping back into survival or group consciousness, and other moments may lift you toward the clarity of reason or the subtle knowing of intuitive awareness. Most people never venture beyond the mirror of ego or the certainty of logic, remaining tethered to the familiar patterns of identity and expectation, unaware that a larger map of being exists. Yet this map is always there, waiting for those willing to look, to question, to probe the hidden architecture of their mind. The real question is not simply which level you occupy today. It is whether you have the courage to climb, to expand beyond the illusions of self, tribe, or intellect, and to confront the uncomfortable truths that lie in the spaces between. Here in these thresholds, you begin to see how trauma shapes perception, how culture influences thought, and how the choice to awaken is both a rebellion and a responsibility. If you are drawn to understanding the mechanics of consciousness, the fractures of human behavior, and the deep psychological truths most avoid, this channel is your compass. Every video is designed to challenge complacency, to illuminate the patterns of mind and existence that most take for granted, and to guide you through the labyrinth of your own awareness. So stay, explore, and question. Watch more, think more, feel more. The journey is ongoing and the invitation remains. Dare to ascend and witness not just the levels of awareness but the astonishing terrain of your own mind.